Hi everyone, welcome to another video created by me, Zan Ta. Today's Autodesk screencast focuses on some of the new features of Revit 2017. This will be one of many videos, so be on the lookout for additional videos in this series. Enjoy! The first new feature in Revit 2017 is depth queuing. Here I am in Revit 2017 in a floor plan view. I've created some basic walls and some basic windows. If I head over to the elevation view, you'll notice that as I zoom in, you'll start to see there is some depth, if you will, between the object closest to me versus the object furthest from me. How is this working, and how does depth queue work? If I go down to the View Control toolbar and go to Graphics Display option, that feature is turned off by default. I actually have it turned on. If I expand depth queuing, I have it showing. So if I uncheck it and I hit apply, the view looks the way it typically looks. If I turn it on, I can adjust the fading at the start and the end locations that are nearest to me or furthest from me from that clipping plane. I can also specify the fading limit, if you will, from light to dark. So for example, let's go ahead and take these all the way to the default and hit apply. You'll notice that with depth queuing turned on and the setting set to 0 for the start location, everything's very, very light on the back end and very dark on the front end. As I move the slider on the left hand side to the right and I hit apply, you'll notice that there is slighter contrast here, whereas this still holds. If I continue to bring this slider further and hit apply, you'll notice the fading is a lot less. If I use the other end of the slider, the far end, and I move it to my left and I click apply, you'll notice objects start to disappear completely. So in the end of the day, for the first slider, you'll have to adjust and tweak it by sliding these bars to the level that you want, and it'll show more or less of the data that you need, like so. The fade limit as well, as I slide the limit from the left to the right and I click apply, the fading will either become lighter or darker. And the further I go to the right, the darker it becomes and the less fading there is going to be. The reality with depth queuing is that it actually doesn't affect the line weight, which is what we really, really hoped and wanted Revit 2017 to adjust. If I go ahead and look at the object styles for walls and windows, in this example, I have already bumped up the walls and windows for their projection and cut line weight. If I go in here and set it back to the default, if I remember correctly, I think it was set to 4, and windows were set to 1. And then the cut, I also bumped it up by 2 levels, so I'm going to drop it down to 2 levels. And I hit apply, and I hit OK. It's very, very subtle. It's very hard to read and see. If you have thin lines turned on, here in the View tab of the Reprographics panel, if thin lines is turned off, you kind of get to see a little bit of thickness. It doesn't show. It's not that good. Also, if I go back to the Graphics Display option and turn off sketchy lines, this is typically what you'll see as a default. Also, the shading, depth queuing, if you will, affects shadows as well. So if you turn off the shadows, you'll start to see. And then lastly, most elevations are black and white. So from a generic standpoint of an elevation that you typically see on a set of construction documents that are not artistic and they are not in color, it's very, very hard to see that there's a change between what's in front versus what's behind. So you'll have to do a little bit of tweaking to get it to display properly. So again, things like shading, If you want it to look sketchy, you can turn sketchy back on. You can bump up the line weights, if you will, for the walls and the windows. So let's say instead of bumping up 2 levels, I bump it up to 3 levels on each of the aspects. And hit apply and hit OK. Now you start to really see a difference between what's in front versus what's behind. So this is the new feature called depth queuing in Revit 2017. The next feature that I want to look at is the railing host improvements. So let's close this file and open up a new file. And here in this 3D view, you'll see 2 sample objects. You'll see we have a floor here that's at a slant, and you have railings that are hosted by it, and it's following that railing much nicer and much easier. You'll also see a wall where we have edited the profile and created a railing that's actually on top of this wall, and it follows the contour of that host. So how does that function and how does that work? We'll go over here to the Architecture tab, Circulation panel, and start the railing command. I'll click Sketch Path, and I'll use Pick Method, and I don't know, let's do 6 inches in, and we'll pick the glass panel. And we'll look at this particular one on the right hand side. And I'll draw the railing, if you will, using the Pick Method. Finish it, and it gets created. Now, by default, it doesn't know its host because I didn't actually specify. It assumed to the default of the host as being the work plane. That's okay. You can select the railing after the fact and click Pick New Host, select that slab, and now it's hosted by that slab. It's a lot easier, and it actually does get hosted by that slab, whereas in 2016 and older, we had a lot of hiccups and problems with that. What if we do the railing on this curved wall? So I can either do the same approach as I did earlier, or I can say Pick New Host first, select that wall, and then I can go in here and I can draw on that wall. And let's use, instead of glass railing, let's use guardrail. And I'll draw that railing directly on top of that host. If you need to, I can click Preview in 3D so you can see what it looks like as we're drawing it. Now this is also going to be dependent upon the graphics card that you're working with. And I currently have an NVIDIA Quadro 5100K graphics card, which you assume is a good card, and by default it is. It's a $1,500 graphics card. But you can see I have problems displaying the railing as a preview, and that's because the card is not sanctioned to run on Revit 2017, so I don't even have an updated driver. But nonetheless, if I click the green check mark, it'll create that railing, and there you go. So that's the railing improvements for Revit 2017. In the next series of videos, I'll continue the what's new in Revit 2017 enhancements. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to presenting another video for you guys.